Welcome to the On the Rise podcast, where we talk about time freedom, passive investing through real estate, finance, and mindset. Let's dive in. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. I am not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer. All right, welcome back On the Rise podcast listeners. Thank you again for jumping into yet another episode of the On the Rise podcast. I'm so glad you're here with us again today. I've got another amazing guest. I have Jennifer Tuggle. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to chopping it up with you. So Jennifer has quite a resume here. She's successfully owned multiple businesses herself. She's invested in rental properties, completed fix and flip projects. Today, she primarily specializes in multifamily syndications as a syndication specialist and a capital raiser. She's helping investors really build wealth through strategic real estate investment opportunities. So with that, Jennifer, would love for you to let our listening audience know a little bit more about yourself, your background, what you're focused on today, etc.
All right. Well, like you mentioned, I don't know. I am a nurse. I am currently an ER nurse. I've been in this field for over 19 years. I have three children. I've raised them as a single mother, worked my way through nursing school, which any nurse knows nursing school is one of the hardest things to go through. So now I am transitioning over to full real estate, multifamily specifically investing, and basically giving that same grit in that, learning as much as I can so that I can perform.
No, that's wonderful. I appreciate that background. I forgot to let our listening audience know that we have a seasoned VIP mother as a guest today. So really exciting. I know that, you kind of made through this journey of raising three children. That are now all three really adults at this point. And as a single mother while working your way through nursing school, kind of looking back, what did that season really teach you, maybe about resilience, that really, serves you today. And I can kind of say that, Jennifer, in the lens of, I was, for several years of my life, I lived with my mother who was single as well. Right. And so didn't really have a father figure, in the home at all. And it was kind of left up to my own devices. And I always tell people that I kind of learned resilience, by failing forward and kind of trying to figure, things out that way. So we'd love for you to maybe unpack a little bit about, your kind of past and your journey, if you're comfortable with that.
Absolutely. Yes. It's honestly something that I'm proud of. My kids they're all successful. I have my youngest, she's in her last year of college at Georgia Tech, but all of them have made me very proud. And working through nursing school, I knew that I needed to do something to better my children's lives overall. While they were little, I was working in factories. I was a phlebotomist starting out. I did, transitioned to an ER tech, and then I worked, my way up to nursing school. So I can say on an average, on a day, very much so weekly basis, but almost daily, I was up probably 30 plus hours just trying to go to work, drop the kids off at school, go to my own school, come back home. They're all in their sports, and just making sure that everything was done that needed to be done. And even now, as they're older, they don't, which is honestly a blessing for me. They didn't realize how much I was doing on the back end because I just tried to be there and show up for my kids. My choices were my choices, and I worked hard to make sure that they had the life that they deserved while I just put in the work to make sure that got done.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it's funny, a lot of times our kids kind of take it for granted, the amount of work that it takes to really be a parent. And usually it doesn't come until the point in which they either have a family of their own or maybe their frontal cortex hardens enough, where they fully realize, wow, it was amazing the type of, grind and determination, my parents had, lugging me, to, this sporting activity, that sporting activity, and the sacrifices that we have to make, with our 9 to 5 in order to put them into the best position, not just to survive, but to thrive.
Exactly. Yes, for sure.
Well, a lot of times, I know you're more on kind of the real estate, investing side now. You've had some experience as both an active, a passive, investor, a capital raiser in the space. I know a lot of people, kind of see success in real estate with investors, and they just kind of see the straight path, right, of success. We both know that's not the case. So, what were some of kind of the toughest moments, you would say, as part of your journey that maybe not many people are aware, exist in real estate investing?
Just the learning aspect of it. People don't truly realize that how big of a group sport this is, and a team sport, I should say, where we're all working together to make it happen. And if you don't do your part to learn what needs to be learned and be able to show up for that team that you're a part of, then you fail. And I can say for myself, being in the position I am now, it's amazing because I truly only work Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it's a unique thing for me. I can work Monday through Thursday. I work night shifts, so essentially Monday through Friday on this. And even with me having that much free time, it is still so hard to be able to do. So others that are doing this and they're working a full-time job and they're Monday through Friday even, it's almost impossible for them to do it at the rate that I have been able to do it. So I can say I'm truly blessed to be in that position to jump into this the way that I have now. But it's a lot of behind the scenes work that people don't realize.
Yeah, it's always a grind, and I like to tell people in real estate, birds fly, fish swim, and real estate falls apart. It's just kind of what happens generally in the space. There's always, headwinds, whether those headwinds are on the operations side or whether they're on executing the business plan side, or whether it's the headwinds that none of us can control, like whatever the next black swan event's going to be, supply demand imbalances, inflation, interest rates, all those kind of things are kind of those external, market risks that, none of us can, really predict with any degree of certainty. We certainly can't control it, right? But we can certainly try to, put the investment in the best position, to be able to absorb, a lot of that uncertainty. So one of the the types of investors that I talk to regularly, and I'm sure you do as well, are going to be people that maybe have been, business owners or entrepreneurs in the past, or maybe they're looking to become one in the future. We've talked to folks that are investing in, short-term rentals and Airbnbs. They've flipped houses. They've been involved in, real estate syndications as a passive investor. What particular strategy or recommendation are you kind of really bullish on, for those, I'll call them those busy working professionals, that already have a 9 to 5, maybe they've got a young or growing family, and they don't really have, time to be, dealing with active investments or small business entrepreneurship in their 5 to 9, when their 9 to 5 is already, full, and they've got, a family, a spouse, friends, those types of things that they need to manage all at the same time.
You mean as a passive investor?
Yeah, as a passive investor that's maybe looking to scratch the entrepreneurial itch, actively manage real estate, start up a business, when really the right path for them is probably more centered around, getting involved, but doing it on a passive basis, not an active basis.
Through this journey, I've realized that a lot of people, they're pushing to be on the GP side of things, but they don't realize the value they have if they have the opportunity to be on the limited partner side and just truly be a passive investor. So I'd like to educate people on, no matter if you're on the LP side, which, for anyone who doesn't know, that's the side where you're investing in this multifamily property and you're still getting a piece of the pie. You're still, you're actually the number one person that gets, treated in this whole process, because if you don't make the money, the GP definitely doesn't make the money. So it's more secure to be on the LP side. So, you know, pushing to be a GP when you may not have that right team or the right property or the ability to put in the work to learn that foundation stuff right now. If you have, the finances to be able to just, invest with another seasoned group or a group that you see is doing the work, then I definitely recommend that part. And I'm working my way up to be on that side of things. But for that 9 to 5 person who can't do this, you know, all the work that I have been blessed to be able to do, that Monday through Friday, putting in the education and the mentorship, that's being on the LP side is a big time. But other than that, they have told me from the beginning, but you need to build relationships from day one and just working with others. And, now I am raising for my own, but just knowing that I should have been reaching out to 1,000 more people than I have along this journey. If you don't do anything else, you should be doing that.
I'm Zach Haptonstall, CEO and co-founder of Rise 48 Equity. Our goal is to help you protect and grow your wealth by investing in large multifamily apartment buildings. We do all the work as far as sourcing these large apartment buildings from the brokers, doing all of the on-site management with our vertically integrated property management company, doing all the renovations with our vertically integrated construction company. We completely rebrand the exteriors. We will renovate the interiors to our full platinum level scope, which increases the value of the asset to get that profit margin for the investor. If you'd like to learn about how you can partner with us on these exciting opportunities, and go to our website and set up a call with our team.
Yeah, 100%. And you're absolutely right. And, your network is your net worth. That's kind of a cliche saying, but, really within, real estate investing, whether it's on the active or the passive side, really it is, like you said, it's really a team sport, right? And, continuing to put yourself out there as an individual contributor in the space and continuing to network with other people, that have, tested or tried a specific investing thesis, or, have actually thoroughly vetted, an operator, a business plan, a market thesis, those types of things can be tremendously, powerful. And I want to kind of throw this out there too, Jennifer, and that is, nursing and real estate seem like two completely different worlds, right? So what transferable skills, really have you been able to take from nursing, to really, help you become a better investor and capital raiser?
So I am an ER nurse specifically, and I have been in leadership for a long time in that, space. So those two things alone, I talk to people when they're at their worst. I take pride in somebody coming in at their worst and making them laugh, putting them in a different headspace while they're trying to deal with what they have going on. And just that part goes into the networking realm of it. I can freely talk to people without hesitation because that's my job. That's what I do on a daily basis. But also on the leadership side of it, I know what teams make sense. I have that discernment for the groups because I'm part of that hiring process. I can see the people I probably shouldn't have brought them in on this portion of the job. So you can kind of pick how people talk and how they do things to know, okay, this is somebody that I would want on my team versus not.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I could see there's a lot of transferable skills between nursing and real estate investing, and just, building up relationships, with others. I know there's a lot of people that get kind of intimidated, when they hear the words multifamily syndications, right? Because they just don't understand it really at the end of the day. I always like to kind of joke that, syndications are a little bit like how the Green Bay Packers are owned by a syndicated group of investors, right? That sort of thing as an analogy. How do you explain multifamily syndications to somebody who's, never invested outside of maybe stocks and bonds?
Basically the same way you just said. And a lot of our returns, they're higher and less risky than the stock markets. So I try to let them see real estate is one of the top ways to invest and get a return on your investment. But people don't, they see these large apartments and they just assume it's just one person with this ton of money that went and purchased it. So when you help them understand, like, it was a group of people that came in and bought this, and now we all profit and we scale and move on from there, that it kind of helps them understand that concept, that it's not just that one billionaire that walked in and put his money bag down.
Yeah. When I learned about real estate syndications, I never look at a commercial real estate property, whether that's an industrial building, a retail strip mall, or a multifamily, workforce housing community. I never look at them the same way again, knowing what I know now. And that is that most of those are owned by, a lot of investors that, have 50,000 or $100,000, stakes or investments, in those projects or properties.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah. I ride past ones and now I can pick the little things about them in a totally different way than I ever did before.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, kind of thinking about, the investors that you talk with, what are maybe like one or two of the biggest, mistakes that you see, new investors making when they first learn about investing outside of Wall Street and into Main Street, predominantly through multifamily syndications?
So, the passive investors, I think that they don't recognize not every deal is for everyone. And I am big on, if this is your last 50,000 or your last 20,000 even, it's not your time to really invest, I try to educate people more and let them understand, this is a process, and learning what you're investing in, just like with stocks. I think a lot of people just jump into stocks because somebody may have said, oh, it's shiny and it's pretty. But, people need to understand that, investing, it comes with a learning curve, and in the end, yes, it's profitable. And in the end, it's something that you could absolutely scale, and, grow in a big way. But just making sure they truly understand what they're investing in.
100%. And that's one of the biggest piece of advice is that, I could give to an investor is before you ever make an investment decision, really you need to make an investment in yourself first. And that is through the power of getting educated. There's lots of great resources, online or books that people can read to really learn more about, the investment, strategy. So I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. Kind of the flip side, what would you say is maybe some of the greatest fears that people have? We like to talk about, analysis paralysis or paralysis by analysis, whatever you want to call it. But what do you say are some of the kind of the more bigger fears, that you see people, having, which gets in the way of them ultimately taking action?
It is that they want to feel like they know every single thing about everything before they take that dive. And for me, the couple properties that I like, I'm under contract on one, I'm looking to be under another one. Just that learning, actually being in it and putting myself out there, it is the best like experience. I've learned so much more than just listening to this video or listening to somebody else. When you're in it, you're learning so much more. So I think that's people's problem is, and that's with anything. You want to feel like you know everything about it before you take that deep dive. But with multifamily, it's not that way. You're with these experienced other partners. I do recommend that part is to at least have one person that is experienced on the team to help you during that process. But while you're in it, I've learned so much, and yeah, it's been a great experience.
I know and I think you're exactly right. I remember when I first got started with my very first passive, investment. It was back in 2015, and I felt the need, after I took the action, right? I kind of felt the need, to sit around and wait for the next, 3 to 5 years to see what happened with that investment. Later, I realized that was a really poor decision because I missed out on a 5-year bull run, in the multifamily, real estate investing space. So I think you're exactly right. Once you get to the point where you at least understand the basics, the concepts, you feel comfortable with the operator, with the business plan, their ability to execute the plan, and then ultimately, their ability to navigate, some of the market headwinds or tailwinds, right? Then I think it's just time to make a decision, right? And once you make that decision, then you'll be able to learn, through the investing experience, which there's certainly more to learn, after you've made that decision, to soft commit to the deal and wire transfer, your funds. I'd like to ask you another question, Jennifer, as we kind of look to wrap it up here, and that is, really from a high level perspective, what does financial freedom mean to you today? And has that definition of financial freedom changed over the course of your life?
It has absolutely changed. Working my way through nursing school, I thought, oh, that's it. If I'm a nurse, everything is, perfect. But now my kids are older. I am still going to work. I am still having to put in for vacation if I want to actually do something. So financial freedom to me is just that, being able to be free to do things. When my kids start to have their, my grandchildren, I want to be able to jump up and go to their games wherever they're living and be a part of their lives in a way where I'm not tied down to this 9 to 5 job that I'm depending on. And doing this real estate right now, I see that. And I've worked with people who have that type of freedom. And that for me, being able to also give back. I am really big on just I, I know it may sound cliche, but I do have a giving heart. And being like, even with people that come into the ER, they may be homeless, they may be struggling in some way. I have stuff in my car where I'm going to bring it in and allow them to have shoes or clothes, and being able to do that on a larger scale for me would be ideal, and showing my grandkids and my kids that it's possible to be able to do.
Yeah. No, that's great. It's great to hear that you're out there blessing others, but I know that those who bless others find a tremendous amount of joy in doing that at the same time or token. So it's almost as much inward as it is, outward. Kind of wrapping up here, you've kind of reinvented yourself a couple of different times, kind of based on the topic of conversations that we've had here. And certainly you're moving into a different, chapter of your life with having, grown children and potentially the title of grandma someday, if not now, some point in the future. What's the biggest lie that people tell themselves from keeping them from pursuing that next chapter of their life?
That I can't do it. Um, that to me is the biggest lie, because I look back on all the things that I did when my kids were younger and staying up all those hours. I'm like, how in the world did I do that? But now I can look at what I'm doing now and say, if I could do it then to make that part of my life happen, I can do it now. And it may be hard, and it may, have sleepless nights or something like that. But guess what? When you get to the end, it is all worth it. So stop telling yourself that you can't do something, because you definitely can.
Yeah, love that, love that. So get educated and take actions, kind of the moral of the story, and be consistent, in those efforts. This has been a wonderful conversation, Jennifer. Thank you for being on the show. Would there be maybe one or yeah, would there be maybe one or two different ways that our listening audience can connect with you offline to learn more about what you're up to?
Absolutely. I have a LinkedIn page. I don't know it. I'm Jennifer Tuggle on LinkedIn, Tuggle. And I also have, my email is jennifer@bucksruninvestments.com. You can always reach out to me there, and we can connect further from there.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, we'll go ahead and put those links in the show notes for the episode. Again, Jennifer, thank you so much for the tremendous value that you've brought us today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And listening audience, thank you again for jumping into yet another episode of the On the Rise podcast. We look forward to having you join us on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the On the Rise podcast. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decisions, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the On the Rise podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.